Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Wealth Compliance Leader series. My guest today is Naresh Tejpal, one of my all-time favorite folks in the industry. And for some context, Naresh brings over 35 years of capital markets experience to this conversation. Most recently, Naresh was the Managing Director and Head of Global Markets Advisory Compliance with Royal Bank of Canada. But if somebody were to step back, I know you have a very fascinating story. Are there a series of events that led to your interest in the topic of financial markets regulation?
I grew up in New York City, and Wall Street was a big part of, every day my dad would listen, watch the news, and they would tell you what the Dow Jones is doing. I didn't know as a kid what the Dow Jones was, but there was that desire to learn more about, that kind of understand what is happening and why is this such a big part of that it hits the news every day. And that desire, and with the desire also, the fact that when I got a little bit older, as a summer job I worked for a small business owner. And every day he would open up his newspaper, and he was really into bonds, and he would look at the bond quotes. And then he started teaching me about bonds and teaching me a little bit about that. So as a young kid, I started learning a little bit of that. So my desire, started with that, and the exposure to, holy smokes, these people have to know what's going on all over the world in order to understand what's happening in this particular market. And that kind of intrigued me. That got me curious as to, okay, maybe this is something I really want to do, because I was always into global politics and understanding the macro and doing that. So this was a way for me to, make a living while also doing something I like, which is understanding history and global politics.
I know from having learned about your background, you worked as a derivatives trader to begin with. So what was the transition like between being from a derivatives trader to sort of transitioning into more of a compliance side of the business?
Yeah, so I started out as a derivatives trader, focusing a lot on options and futures, but a big chunk of it was options, and with the underlying being equities, or the underlyings could be a whole whack of things, whether it was the early days of ETFs and so on and so forth. And it was quite exciting doing that. But after 15 years, that business can take a toll on you when you're running P&L, and you're doing that on the institutional side of things. And I always wanted to have a balance in life. And that was one of those things. So it was a conscious decision to say, you know what, I want to have more structure as far as being there for the family and those kinds of events. It was a personal choice. And one of the ways that I wanted to look for a field to get into in compliance at that point, we're talking about mid-2000s here. I was looking at compliance, and I had a few friends in compliance, and they told me that, look, this is an area, if you're into law, if you're into history, if you into that type of thinking, it is an area that is good cerebrally. It's a fascinating place to be. And so I took their advice and transitioned. So the transition was natural, because I was still talking about the same products, but I was looking at the other side of the coin. I was looking at the rulemaking side of what I was doing in my original career, which was trading. So the transition was good, knowing one side and going to the other side and trying to, put those pieces together and understanding why those rules are there and what was the purpose of those rules was fascinating. And I think that was over time, it has become a very fulfilling move for me personally.
That's a fantastic story, and I speak to a lot of folks in the compliance profession, obviously, given what we do at InvestorCOM, but there is a little bit of a common denominator in that, Naresh, as you've said, nobody just, not many people, I should say, start out their career in compliance. There's often a, hey, let me go learn about the business on this side, and then have a little bit of a focus and a transition to the compliance function, because it brings in different facets, to your point about law, history, operations, how the business functions. And that's tremendously interesting. Now, given your experience and given the fact that you've worked across trading desks, to compliance, to oversight, to observing many regulatory reforms, if Naresh had this magic wand at this point in your career, what would you do? What would you do to kind of wave that magic wand to transition our industry for the better?
Whether when I was in trading or whether I moved to compliance, you always ask yourself, what is your edge, right? In trading or in sales, what's your edge? Why should a customer pick up the phone and talk to you? What are you going to provide? And in trading, what's your edge, when you're trying to do a trade? And similarly, in compliance, you ask yourself, well, what's your edge? And, one of the things, and I know you're in the technology field, so you would understand, but I literally think finding ways to augment the resources you have and the reach you have, because there's so many products, in capital markets, you're looking at FX, whether you're looking at FX swaps, you're looking at commodities, equities and, debt products, rates and all of that. You need to have some way to become more efficient. And adding people is not the way you become more efficient. You need to add people, but the technology, if available, is a key component. I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we were looking at, and we actually did at one of my employers, is we got into machine learning. We got into machine learning around 2016, 2017, because we wanted to get to a couple of asset classes that there weren't existing tools. So we decided to then take a leap and partner with a technology firm and say, this is what we'd like to see. We know what we want to see, but we need help in the technology side of it. And it took work. It took, a kind of a partnership with a technology firm. But what also, is convincing people that this was the right approach to take. And I think, the way I looked at it, I owed it to my firm to kind of show them that there is a better way to do it. And we were able to do it. There was a lot of work involved in it by many, many people. But at the end of the day, it was a great learning experience. It was a way for us to become more efficient with our resources. And along the way, we learned a lot, which helped other parts of the bank. Right. So it's you're not doing things in silos. There is always a vibration or an impact that happens across that can be very positive.
I love that. I love that. I love the purposeful sort of approach to tackling, embracing regulatory change, Naresh, and sort of you call it trickle down or cascading effect of embracing some of those difficulties, some of those challenges. And speaking of which, one of the things that we've talked about in the past has been sort of this confluence or consistent wave of regulations in our industry. Whether you're looking at the capital market side, the wealth management side, there is always if there's ever a consistent theme, it's the fact that there's firms, industry participants can always expect change. And so to your point about that question of whether you look at technology or you look at adding headcount, I'm sure you've got tremendous amount of experience on this front. And one example that comes to my mind is on the Reg BI file, or even the client focused reforms in Canada. There is that knee-jerk reaction when there is a regulatory change for firms to say, all right, I need 3 more compliance analysts and 10 more manual processes, right? As someone who's a leader in our industry, can you sort of walk through how you've been able to kind of transition or sort of manage not only regulatory change, but sort of facing it head on strategically to say, look, maybe it's machine learning, or maybe a technology first approach will be the best way forward?
I think as most people who are charged with looking at areas of responsibility and have an obligation to their teams and to the firm itself, I think it behooves us to look at what is on our menu, right? So it isn't, to your point, it isn't just about headcounts, which are very expensive, by the way, and these are long-term commitments in most cases. But you do look at that, and sometimes that is the right approach. But you need to look at it as a menu that includes technology, and by that I mean internal folks across the firm, depending on the size of your firm. I've spent my years at 4 of the 5 big banks, and there is always technology happening different places. But if looking at external technology providers, internal technology providers, experts and all that, that is a tool that you need to look at in this day and age. I mean, I spoke to you earlier about, when I was young, they were reading a newspaper with bond quotes. I mean, yeah, we don't do that. I mean, you can still get a newspaper, but there's more efficient ways. That life has moved on, right? It's all about embracing changes and looking at what are your tools available to you. And I would argue that if somebody's doing, say, surveillance at this point and not using technology or augmenting technology, there is a serious problem, in that. So generally speaking, I would say, one has to look at all of the various items on the menu and decide what is the best approach, because you need to take that approach. And no longer, I think, you can get away or at least ask and say, I need to hire more people. I think efficiency is one of the top things. Not only do you owe that to your superiors, people you report to, and ultimately we owe it to our shareholders, that we need to make sure that we are using that efficient capital, right? Because everybody will look at, your efficiency rating.
Naresh, I love these conversations and I love learning from you on this stuff, because what you're sharing is from the heart, and it comes from a fantastic experience you've accumulated through the years. Really appreciate your time, sir. Hopefully we get a chance to do this again soon.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of our Wealth Compliance Leader Series. If you want to be part of the conversation, please reach out, and we look forward to you tuning in into another episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have a great day.